Most safety guides teach you how to survive. This video does the opposite. Today we're studying a very special kind of textbook, the unofficial field manual written by people who managed to lose an argument with reality in the most spectacular ways possible. These are not movie scenes. These are not internet myths. These are real stories where someone looked at a bad idea, thought about it for exactly 3 seconds, and then sprinted straight toward it like a golden retriever chasing a tennis ball. Electricity, wild animals, industrial machinery, explosives, all of them come with very clear warning labels. But every once in a while, a human being appears who looks at those warnings and thinks, yeah, but what if I'm different? Spoiler alert, they were not different. Today we're diving into 10 of the stupidest ways people have ever died. Darwin Award level decisions so unbelievably dumb, they almost qualify as performance art. Think of this video as a reverse survival guide, a list of things you should absolutely never do, unless your life goal is to become a cautionary tale narrated by someone on YouTube. So pay attention, because every single story in this video proves one important rule about the universe. Physics doesn't negotiate. Animals don't care about your confidence, and stupidity has a very high success rate. Let's begin. 1. The jet ski charging experiment. It was a perfect summer afternoon on Lake Washington. Sun shining, water sparkling, a man named Rodney living what looked like the ideal American weekend. Rodney was blasting across the lake on his jet ski like the star of a cheap action movie. Fast turns, big splashes, the kind of carefree energy that only appears when a grown adult is temporarily pretending responsibilities don't exist. And then the jet ski died. Just like that. Engine silent, battery dead, Rodney floating in the middle of the lake like a confused plastic lawn chair. Now, this is not a life-threatening situation. It's annoying, yes, but people deal with this problem every single day. Usually, the solution involves something very simple. Tow the jet ski back to shore, charge the battery, continue enjoying life. Rodney managed the first part perfectly. A passing boat helped tow him back to a dock that had a convenient electrical outlet. Rodney grabbed a battery charger from his car and plugged it into the dock's standard 110-volt power outlet. So far, everything was normal. But here's the small detail Rodney forgot to consider. His jet ski was still sitting in the water. Now, most people, when dealing with electricity and a giant conductive body of water, experience a very natural instinct called basic survival awareness. Rodney did not appear to suffer from this condition. Instead of pulling the jet ski onto dry land first, Rodney stood on the dock holding the energized jumper cables like a man about to complete the world's most questionable science experiment. The charger hummed quietly. Electricity patiently waited inside the cables. All Rodney had to do was connect the clips to the battery terminals on the jet ski, which meant he had to step back onto the jet ski, which was still floating in the lake. Rodney jumped from the dock onto the wet surface of the jet ski, and in that exact moment, Rodney achieved something remarkable. He became the missing component in an electrical circuit. Electricity loves shortcuts, and Rodney had just volunteered to be the fastest route from power source to ground. The current surged through him instantly, using his body as the world's most enthusiastic extension cord. For a brief, unforgettable moment, Rodney successfully demonstrated a principle every physics student already knows. Water conducts electricity. So do humans, especially when they are standing in a lake while holding live power cables. By the time anyone realized what had happened, the experiment was already over. Rodney had successfully charged the jet ski. Unfortunately, he also charged himself. It was a powerful reminder that electricity is incredibly useful, but it does prefer its engineers to stay outside the circuit. 2. The perfect tax hiding place. Some people are afraid of ghosts. Some people are afraid of heights. And then there are people who are absolutely terrified of one thing and one thing only: the IRS. Our next genius was one of those people. To him, taxes weren't just paperwork. They were a full-blown government conspiracy designed specifically to steal his hard-earned money. So he did what any rational, level-headed person would do. He decided to build a secret vault in his basement. Not a safe, not a lockbox, a hidden room. His plan was simple: create a completely undiscoverable bunker where he could stash cash, valuables, and anything else the taxman might be interested in. He spent weeks building it. Concrete walls, hidden entrance, false panel covering the doorway. It was his masterpiece, his personal Fort Knox. And because he was extremely serious about secrecy, he made one very important design decision. No ventilation. See, vents could be discovered. Air ducts could give away the location of the room. So instead, he created something even better. A perfectly sealed concrete box. No windows, no air circulation, no oxygen coming in. Just a small airtight room hidden behind a wall in his basement. Now for a while, everything worked perfectly. He would go down there occasionally to check on his hidden stash, admire his cleverness, and enjoy the satisfaction of knowing the government would never find his secret. But then summer arrived, and it arrived hard. A brutal heat wave rolled through town. Temperatures climbed. His house turned into a slow-roasting oven. Meanwhile, his underground bunker stayed nice and cool. Naturally, this gave him a fantastic idea. Why not take a nap down there? It was quiet, it was cool, it was private. He walked into the secret room, closed the hidden door behind him, stretched out on the cool concrete floor, and drifted off to sleep feeling extremely pleased with himself. Now here's the small problem with airtight rooms. Humans require oxygen, and when you breathe inside a sealed space, something interesting happens. You inhale oxygen, you exhale carbon dioxide. Slowly, very slowly, the oxygen disappears and the carbon dioxide builds up. You don't feel it immediately. There's no dramatic choking, no warning alarm. Your body just gets a little sleepier, a little weaker, until eventually your brain simply shuts down. And because our tax-evading architect had designed the perfectly sealed hiding place, there was absolutely no fresh air entering the room. He never woke up. His brilliant anti-government bunker had worked exactly as intended. No one could find it. Not the IRS, not the neighbors, not even the oxygen he desperately needed to stay alive. He had successfully hidden his money from the government. Unfortunately, he also managed to hide himself from the entire atmosphere, which turns out to be a resource you really shouldn't store outside the vault. 3. The lawnmower helicopter. Every suburban neighborhood has one. That guy. The man whose entire personality revolves around the quality of his lawn. Not a normal lawn. Oh no, his lawn must be perfect. No stray blades, no uneven patches, grass trimmed so precisely it looks like the 18th hole at Augusta National. Our hero was one of those men. Every Saturday morning, he marched outside with his push mower like a general preparing for battle. The smell of gasoline, the roar of the engine, the sacred ritual of suburban turf domination. But there was a problem. His mower wasn't perfect. It left tiny, uneven cuts, small patches where the grass wasn't trimmed as cleanly as he wanted. To a normal person, this is barely noticeable. To him, this was unacceptable. He didn't just want a good lawn, he wanted surgical precision. So one afternoon, while staring at his mower in the garage, a truly magnificent idea appeared in his brain. A lawnmower blade cuts grass. A helicopter blade cuts air. Helicopter blades are sharper, bigger, faster. So logically, a helicopter blade should cut grass better. Somehow, and nobody knows exactly how, he managed to get his hands on a set of small rotor blades, maybe from a surplus store, maybe from a very questionable online auction. But to him, they weren't aircraft parts. They were the future of lawn care. He spent an entire weekend modifying his mower. Out came the factory blade. In went the helicopter rotor. Bolted, adjusted, improvised. By Sunday afternoon, he stood back in the driveway admiring his creation. A standard push mower, now equipped with blades designed to spin fast enough to lift a small aircraft. It looked dangerous. It looked ridiculous. It looked like something a man should absolutely never start. So naturally, he pulled the starter cord. The engine sputtered. Then, the blades began to spin. Slowly at first, then faster, then much faster. The machine didn't just hum, it screamed. Grass clippings exploded everywhere. Dirt blasted across the yard like a miniature tornado. For a few glorious seconds, It actually worked. The grass was being cut with terrifying precision, but there was one small mechanical oversight. The engine on a push mower is designed to spin a light metal blade, not a massive aerodynamic rotor designed for aviation. The torque became unbearable. The entire machine began to vibrate violently. Bolts rattled, metal groaned, and then one of the rotor blades snapped free. Not gently, violently. The blade launched off the mower like a spinning metal missile with absolutely no interest in lawn care anymore. Our inventor was standing proudly behind his creation when it happened. He never had time to react. The spinning blade struck him in the neck with surgical precision. Ironically, the cleanest cut his lawn equipment had ever produced. In the end, his grass was still slightly uneven, but his lawn mower had proven something very important. Helicopter blades are extremely effective cutting tools, just not for landscaping. 4. The gunpowder fireplace. Living alone in the Alaskan wilderness requires a certain kind of personality. You have to be tough, self-reliant, the kind of person who solves problems instead of calling for help. Our next hero was exactly that kind of man. He lived in a small log cabin miles away from the nearest town. No neighbors, no traffic, just forest, snow, and silence. It was the kind of life people in cities romanticize while drinking coffee and watching survival documentaries. But the reality of that life has one very important rule. Fire equals survival. If the fire in your cabin goes out during an Alaskan winter, things can become extremely serious very quickly. And on one particularly brutal winter evening, his fire was dying. The logs in the fireplace had burned down to a few weak glowing embers. The warmth in the cabin was fading. The cold outside was pressing against the walls like an unwanted guest. Now there was an obvious solution. Go outside. Chop more wood. Bring it inside. But it was cold, very cold, and chopping wood takes effort. So instead of going outside, our rugged survivalist looked around the cabin for something that might help reignite the fire faster. And then he saw it. A large metal can sitting on a shelf. Inside that can was something he used for reloading rifle ammunition. Gunpowder. Now at this point, most people would pause, because gunpowder and fireplaces usually belong in two completely separate categories of life decisions. But he had a theory. Wood burns, gunpowder burns, so logically, gunpowder should make the wood burn faster. The original plan was probably to sprinkle a little bit onto the embers. Just a small boost, a tiny spark of encouragement. But then another thought appeared. Why sprinkle when you can commit? Instead of a pinch, he grabbed the entire can. He walked over to the fireplace, popped the lid open, and dumped the whole thing directly onto the glowing embers. In his mind, this would create a satisfying whoosh, a dramatic burst of flame that would instantly bring the fire back to life. What he failed to understand is that loose gunpowder inside a confined space does not create a whoosh. It creates something much closer to a cannon blast. The moment the powder hit the embers, the entire pile ignited at once. The fireplace essentially turned into a giant gun barrel. The explosion was instant and catastrophic. The force of the blast tore through the small wooden cabin, blowing apart walls, windows, and everything inside. The peaceful log cabin disappeared in a violent cloud of splintered timber and smoke. When investigators eventually reached the remote site, there was almost nothing left. Just debris, and a large crater where the fireplace used to be. Our wilderness survival expert had wanted to start a fire, and technically, he succeeded. Just not the small, cozy kind people usually aim for in a living room. It turns out when you try to warm your house with explosives, the fire tends to spread a little farther than expected. 5. The Moose Wrestling Championship. Canada is a beautiful country. Majestic forests, crystal lakes, clean air, and animals the size of small cars. Among these animals is the moose. Now, if you've never seen a moose in person, it's important to understand something. Moose are not deer. They are 800 to 1,200 pounds of muscle, antlers, and extremely bad attitudes. They can run faster than horses, kick harder than a mule, and they absolutely do not care about your personal bravery. Which brings us to our next champion of poor decision-making. One night in rural Canada, a group of friends were having a pretty legendary evening. There was music, there was laughter, and there was a truly heroic amount of beer. Our protagonist had apparently decided that moderation was for people with weaker spirits, so he powered through an entire case of beer by himself. Now, alcohol does many things to the human brain. It reduces caution, it boosts confidence, and sometimes it creates ideas so unbelievably stupid that they deserve their own documentary. After finishing his final beer, our hero stood up and made a bold announcement. He was going outside to wrestle a moose. Not look at a moose, not photograph a moose, wrestle one. His friends, who were also operating with extremely limited brain power at that point, thought this was the funniest idea ever suggested by a human being. So they cheered him on, because nothing encourages stupidity like a supportive audience. Our champion stumbled out into the dark forest behind the house, shouting challenges into the wilderness like a drunken gladiator. And incredibly, he actually found one. Standing in a clearing was a massive bull moose, peacefully eating leaves and minding its own business. The animal probably weighed around 1,000 pounds. Our hero weighed maybe 180, but alcohol had convinced him this was a fair fight. He let out a heroic battle cry and charged forward, arms wide, ready to grapple, ready to prove himself the undisputed heavyweight champion of extremely bad ideas. The moose slowly turned its head, and for a brief moment, the animal probably experienced pure confusion, because nothing in nature prepares you for the sight of a drunk human sprinting toward you while yelling. But once the moose understood what was happening, it responded the way large animals usually do. It kicked. Just one kick. A simple, casual, rear leg kick. The kind a moose might use to swat away an annoying fly. Unfortunately, when that fly weighs 180 pounds, the result is significantly more dramatic. The kick landed square in our hero's chest with the force of a small car crash. His wrestling career ended instantly. When his friends eventually found him, the scene was quiet, the forest calm, the moose gone, and our champion lying there as a permanent reminder of one very important wildlife rule. If an animal weighs half a ton and has antlers that look like furniture, you are not in the same weight class. 6. The grape conveyor surfing incident. Harvest season at a winery is usually a beautiful thing. The air smells like fresh grapes. Workers move baskets of fruit through the vineyards. And somewhere in the distance, someone is always talking about notes of oak and bold flavors. But behind all that romantic imagery is a very simple reality. A winery is also full of large industrial machines designed to crush things. And on one particular harvest day, one seasonal worker decided to test exactly how efficient those machines were. The winery had a massive conveyor belt that carried freshly picked grapes up into the processing system. The belt moved slowly but steadily, feeding tons of fruit into a huge mechanical crusher that separated grapes from their stems and smashed them into juice. It was loud, it was powerful, and it was absolutely not designed for recreational activities. But our hero had been sampling the product throughout the day. Quite a lot of the product. After several glasses of wine, the giant moving conveyor belt no longer looked like industrial equipment. It looked like a ride. Specifically, it looked like a giant grape water slide. Standing there with his coworkers, he made a grand announcement. He was going to ride the conveyor belt. His plan was simple. He would jump onto the belt, surf the grapes like a champion, and then hop off right before reaching the crushing machine. A quick ride, a funny story, a legendary moment for the break room. His coworkers laughed. Some of them probably tried to tell him not to do it, but the combination of wine and an audience is one of the most powerful stupidity accelerators known to science. So he took a running start and jumped. For a few glorious seconds, it worked perfectly. He was riding the conveyor belt like a hero, sliding across thousands of freshly picked grapes while laughing and waving at his coworkers below. Purple juice splashed everywhere. People were cheering. It probably felt like the greatest idea he had ever had. But there were two small details he had completely miscalculated. First, the conveyor belt was moving faster than he expected. Second, the crushing machine at the end of the belt was extremely efficient. The moment he realized he needed to jump off, it was already too late. The belt carried him forward in a blur of grapes and bad decisions. He tried to grab the side rails, missed. tried to stand up, slipped, and within seconds he was pulled directly into the massive metal augers of the crusher. The machine that had spent all day processing grapes did not pause. It did not hesitate. It simply continued doing what it was designed to do. The laughter from his coworkers turned into shocked silence as the reality of the situation became clear. He had wanted to ride the grape conveyor like a surfer. Instead, he ended up becoming a completely unintended part of that year's harvest, which probably gave the winery a very unusual flavor profile, somewhere between oak, berries, and terrible decision-making. 7. The Influencer. Iceheart. The internet has created a new kind of survival challenge. Not fighting bears, not climbing mountains, no. The modern challenge is much more dangerous: going viral. Our next contestant was a young content creator who wanted exactly that. Millions of followers, millions of views, and a moment of internet fame. Unfortunately, the algorithm rewards two things more than anything else: attention and bad ideas. One winter afternoon, she arrived at a frozen river carrying a chainsaw and a camera tripod. Her plan was simple, artistic, beautiful, and catastrophically stupid. She was going to carve a giant heart shape into the frozen river while standing on the ice. A symbol of love, a poetic moment in the cold Russian winter, something dramatic enough to explode across social media. She set up the camera on the riverbank, hit record, and walked confidently onto the frozen surface with the chainsaw in her hands. Her breath fogged in the cold air. Snow sparkled. It probably looked incredible on camera. She started the chainsaw. The loud roar shattered the quiet of the frozen landscape as the blade cut cleanly through the ice. Slowly, carefully, she began carving the first half of the heart. Ice sprayed everywhere. The shape began to appear. Her masterpiece was coming to life. Then she carved the second curve. The heart was almost complete. Just one final cut remained, the bottom point that would close the shape perfectly. But there was a small geometric detail she had completely overlooked. She was standing inside the heart. When she made that final cut, the heart-shaped slab of ice separated cleanly from the surrounding frozen river. For one brief moment, the shape was perfect. A giant heart floating on the surface of the ice. Then gravity joined the conversation. The floating slab tilted, the ice cracked, and the entire heart-shaped platform flipped into the freezing water, along with its creator. The camera on the riverbank continued recording. It captured the chainsaw noise stopping, the splash, then silence. The frozen river slowly returned to its peaceful winter calm. Her heart carving had technically worked. The shape was beautiful, perfect even. Unfortunately, she had carved the heart out from under her own feet, which is a strong reminder that if your viral video requires cutting a hole in the surface you're standing on, you may want to reconsider the choreography. 8. The Gasoline Barbecue. Backyard barbecues are one of America's greatest traditions. Friends show up, someone brings beer, someone else argues about sports, and one guy stands at the grill pretending he understands fire. This story begins with that guy. It was a sunny afternoon in Texas, and our hero was preparing for a classic backyard cookout. Burgers, hot dogs, the whole deal. The only problem? His charcoal refused to light. Now, lighting charcoal is not complicated. Most people use lighter fluid, wait a few minutes, then ignite the coals like civilized adults. But patience is not the dominant personality trait in backyard grill culture. Our grill master wanted results immediately. So he went to the garage looking for something stronger. What he came back with was not lighter fluid. It was a 5-gallon gasoline can. Now, gasoline is technically an accelerant. It absolutely will make fire bigger and faster. What gasoline also produces is something extremely important: vapor. And gasoline vapor is basically invisible explosive gas. Our hero did not appear to know this. His first step was pouring a generous amount of gasoline directly onto the charcoal. At this point, the grill had already crossed the line from barbecue to minor arson experiment. But he didn't stop there, because a second, even more brilliant idea appeared. Instead of lighting the grill directly, he decided to create a dramatic ignition trail, like something from an action movie. He poured a long line of gasoline from the grill across the patio to where he was standing. His plan was cinematic. He would light the gasoline trail like a fuse. The flame would race across the ground. Then the grill would ignite in one glorious explosion of fire. Very cool. Very dramatic. Very, very stupid. What he forgot was that gasoline vapors had already spread through the air around him. So when he struck the match, the flame didn't politely travel along the ground. The entire vapor cloud ignited all at once. A massive fireball exploded instantly across the patio. The flame raced backward along the gasoline trail toward the source, which, unfortunately, was the open gas can he was still holding. Gasoline containers and fireballs have a complicated relationship. The can detonated in his hands, engulfing him in a blast of flame that probably ended the barbecue before anyone had time to bring the potato salad outside. His guests definitely got a memorable cookout, just not the kind anyone had planned. He had wanted to supercharge the grill. Instead, he had supercharged the entire backyard. And unfortunately, he ended up being the only thing that got fully cooked that day. 9. The rocket-powered battering ram. Crime requires creativity. Unfortunately, creativity without physics knowledge tends to end badly. This particular story comes from Brazil, where one ambitious thief decided he was going to break into a gun store. Now, gun stores are not built like convenience stores. They tend to have reinforced doors, security systems, and very thick bulletproof glass, which meant our criminal entrepreneur needed something stronger than a brick. While searching for tools, he found the perfect object at a nearby construction site: a large, heavy, compressed gas cylinder. Old, rusty, massive. To him, it looked like the ideal battering ram. So he rolled the huge cylinder down the street to the gun store like a man dragging a metal torpedo through town. The plan was simple: run forward, swing the cylinder, smash the glass. And after a few attempts, it seemed to be working. He lifted the heavy tank onto his shoulder and slammed it into the reinforced glass. Thud. The window shook. The glass cracked slightly. Encouraged, he backed up and tried again. Thud. More cracks. The system was working. He was winning. So he stepped back one final time, ready for the finishing blow. He charged forward with all his strength and slammed the cylinder into the window again. And that's when physics decided to get involved. The repeated impacts had weakened the valve at the top of the cylinder, and during that final hit, the valve snapped off. Now here's the important part. The cylinder wasn't empty. It still contained compressed gas. And when the valve broke, the gas shot out instantly. The heavy metal tank didn't just fall to the ground, it launched itself like a rocket. But instead of flying toward the glass, it blasted backward, directly into the man holding it. The force was enormous. The tank slammed into his chest and pinned him violently against the wall of the building behind him. In a single second, the weapon he had chosen to break into the gun store had become the most effective weapon used that night. His own. He had tried to break into a building full of firearms. Instead, he was defeated by a rusty gas tank that suddenly discovered it had a rocket engine. Which is an excellent reminder of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite consequence, especially when you accidentally build a rocket while committing a burglary. 10. The sea lion kiss. Working with animals requires trust, but it also requires remembering one very important rule. Animals are still animals. Our final story takes place at a marine park in Spain, where a professional sea lion trainer had spent years performing shows for excited crowds. He was experienced, confident, comfortable around animals that weighed several hundred pounds. The star of the show was a massive sea lion, nearly 600 pounds of muscle and blubber, famous for performing tricks that made the audience cheer. Clapping, balancing balls, catching fish mid-air. The trainer loved the applause. The crowd loved the performance. And over time, he developed a reputation for adding a little extra flair to the routine. On this particular afternoon, he decided to create a finale the audience would never forget. He grabbed a large fish, the sea lion's reward, and did something unusual. Instead of holding it in his hand, he placed the fish in his own mouth, with the tail sticking out. Then he knelt at the edge of the pool. The idea was simple. The sea lion would gently swim up, take the fish from his mouth, and it would look like a playful kiss between human and animal. A beautiful moment, heartwarming, perfect for photos. The crowd leaned forward with their cameras ready. The music swelled. The trainer smiled and leaned toward the water, but the sea lion was not interested in choreography. It saw only one thing: fish. And when a 600-pound sea lion sees food, it does not approach politely. It launches. The animal exploded out of the water like a living torpedo, jaws snapping toward the fish with the full force of instinct. The bite grabbed the fish instantly, but the fish was still clamped between the trainer's teeth. The violent jerk whipped his head forward with terrifying speed. His skull slammed directly into the concrete edge of the pool. The impact echoed across the silent arena. The trainer collapsed instantly and fell into the water unconscious. The sea lion, completely unaware that anything unusual had happened, happily swam away with its fish. The audience got the unforgettable finale they had been promised, just not the one anyone expected. The trainer had wanted to show the magical bond between humans and animals, but he forgot one small detail. His co-star weighed 300 kilograms and was extremely motivated by seafood. Sometimes the difference between a kiss and a headbutt from nature is just a single fish. So today we learned 10 extremely effective ways to lose an argument with reality. A man who turned himself into a human electrical circuit. A tax evader who built the world's most airtight coffin. A lawnmower upgraded with helicopter blades. A gunpowder fireplace renovation. A drunk man who challenged a moose to combat. A winery worker who tried to surf an industrial conveyor belt. An influencer who carved a heart out from under her own feet. A barbecue powered by gasoline and optimism. A burglar accidentally inventing a rocket. And a sea lion that misunderstood the word kiss. Different stories, different locations, same ending. Confidence ran forward, while common sense stayed home. Now we want to hear from you. Which one of these legendary bad decisions deserves the Darwin Award of the day? The rocket thief? The moose wrestler? Or the guy who tried to light his barbecue with gasoline? Drop your vote in the comments. And if you've ever seen someone do something so unbelievably stupid that it felt like a nature documentary about human evolution going backwards, tell that story too, because humanity continues to produce new entries for this list every single day. If you enjoyed today's reverse survival guide, make sure to like the video and subscribe to Mr. Playdumb, because somewhere out there right now, someone is staring at a terrible idea and saying the most dangerous sentence in the English language. Relax.